The kaijus are here, and the cities are collapsing. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys Pacific Rim Knifehead. Knifehead is a jagged-toothed headhunter with a deadly toxic bite and acid flowing through its veins. It uses its monstrous head blade to slice through boats, buildings, and mechs, and 4 sets of claws to tear enemies to pieces. Beware of this biohazard lurking in the deep. While Knifehead slices and dices, let's grab the tape measure and see how big the beast is. While I'm doing this as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the Pacific Rim Knifehead that we can have a look at this review. These Pacific Rim figures, by the way, are available right now in retail stores and online. Knifehead, though, stands about 4 1/4 inches in height, or it's about 10.5 centimeters tall. And while we are dealing with a scale so small, let's slide over Knifehead and bring in the earlier looked at Gypsy Danger. Now, Gypsy Danger, if you were to get them actually a stand, it just involves getting the legs to be completely straight. The figures are about the same size to one another. I don't know why I'm having so many problems getting... There we go. You can see that they are about the same size. If anything, you maybe could give the height clearance to Gypsy being a slight bit tad taller. What has been the case with these Pacific Rim figures is, of course, you get your main figure, you get yourself a building to destroy, tiny little vehicles to protect that building, and you get yourself an issue of Pacific Rim Aftermath. Judging by the fact that this is number 1, I probably should have started the order with these figures looking at Knifehead first, and maybe Gypsy Danger a little bit later. This starts at least the story of Pacific Rim Aftermath, quickly flipping through the pages, showing you guys some somewhat decent artwork of kaijus. And just continue to flip through. Obviously, this is going to end in a bit of a cliffhanger, tying then into issue number 2. And I think as well, that's Ron Perlman from Pacific Rim number 2. Now, Pacific Rim, the second Pacific Rim, I didn't like as much as the first film. This ends, though, with I Am Pentecost, Part 1 of Aladdin's Cave, and follows up then with Pacific Rim Aftermath number 2. The Uprising begins here. And, of course, on the back, you also got some advertisements from McFarlane Toys releases as well. I would love, eventually, when I finish having a look at all these Pacific Rim figures, to start the comics at the beginning of issue number 1 and work my way chronologically in the correct order to see where the story goes. Moving the comic out of the way, Knifehead, the kaiju Knifehead, does also come included with a building. Now, does the building look familiar to you? It probably should, because it happens to be the exact same building, somewhat, other than the top piece that came also included with Gypsy Danger. Other than just the top being molded differently, all the building streets, at least the bottom of the streets, and all the building parts leading up to the top are exactly the same as Gypsy Danger. Didn't believe me? Well, in fact, you can take the 2 parts off and switch them around. This was the one that came included with Knifehead. This is the one that came included with Gypsy Danger. And again, all the parts underneath are exactly the same to one another. I don't expect them either to have unique molds for any of these buildings anyways. I mean, obviously the whole idea in mind is that you can have these all connected with one another. The more of these figures that you end up buying, the bigger the city you actually can build. And also as well with these, putting these tops back the way I found them. The benefits of these buildings too is the fact that they are sectional. I'm going to slide out the way the one that came from Gypsy Danger. Carefully picking up the one that comes included with Knifehead. First, maybe a little look at the actual city. So you got yourself, of course, the roadways. You can have yourself the tiny little vehicles working their way up the streets. This little section, of course, the bottom of the building will be, and then just, again, connect multiples of these together. What I do like about the buildings is that they do detach from one another. They seem to be, and also in a design that you can rotate them around. So while you will have to put them in the proper order of this being always the bottom one, that always being the top, the actual rotation of these, it doesn't seem to matter which way you put them. One thing I also really like is the fact that if you wanted to have these as some fallen ruins, any one of these can detach from one another very easily, and all of them do have a finished top to them. So if you wanted to have a partial building partially broken, just the top half of it removed altogether, you'd at least have a finished top where they've sculpted it. I'm glad to see they took the time to actually put that in there. Eventually, when I do get through all these Pacific Rim reviews, obviously my big goal in mind is to have these all out in a big city diorama. Maybe even if you don't even want to have them displayed necessarily as Pacific Rim, just the idea of smaller little cityscapes. Ideally, maybe good for, like, if you have Godzilla figures of this size and stature. So let's just move back the building just for a little bit here. To come also include with Knifehead, you get yourself 2 vehicles. One seems to be a military Humvee. a little Hummer at the top there. I call it Humvee. A little Hummer at the top there. It does have a Gatling gun, although it doesn't rotate. It's molded nicely here in a dark military green. It doesn't have any rolling wheels. It's just basically a molded piece. It has no posability, no moving parts at all. But what it does also come included with is a tank that doesn't have treads. It doesn't have rolling wheels necessarily, but what it does have is a rotating turret. I like that. A turret actually was something also very similar as well to the Gypsy Danger. Gypsy Danger came included with a little bit larger of a tank, but it also had a rotating turret. Gypsy Danger also came included with a little tiny military transport truck. Again, nothing moves really on the tires, but a nice little sculpted piece nonetheless. And again, you can have these. I mean, obviously, they're not really scaled necessarily to the building. The building really should be a lot bigger, or the vehicles should be a lot smaller, but they couldn't really release these figures with tiny, tiny little vehicles about this size. That would make no sense. You'd lose them right away. So let's get a closer look now at Knifehead. Now, the Knifehead itself, while being a really nicely detailed figure, of course, as with the other earlier looked at Gypsy Danger, it does lack some necessary posability. This one actually does lack a little bit more of the posability because his head is basically just built to the rest of his body. There is no posability where you can actually rotate the head at all. But even that, it does make for a really nice little knife head. The knife head is colored. I mean, mostly the plastic kind of is more of a very greenish gray. And then you've got some accented areas here with the tops and the bottom of the teeth painted a very bright blue. The eyes are also painted blue, and I'd have to go back and watch the original Pacific Rim. I don't recall a time where Knifehead actually had these sort of jagged lines, a continuation of the blue sort of trickling down the front of its face, unless it's wounded. When I originally think of Knifehead, I always think of just tiny little pupils colored. I don't really remember him having these little, again, I don't think it's supposed to be a paint issue because really he has it on both sides. Clearly looks to be intentional, but I don't remember it ever having a time where, like I said, it had the little, it almost looks like it's crying. I don't know why it would be crying. The coloring also carries over here, not necessarly in blue, but you got a little undercarriage there in a lighter gray, and you got some really nice zigzagging of yellow down the sides of its arms. Where it does also lack posability, it lacks also in paints. It does really rely on just the green plastic alone, but again, for its size, it's a nice little rendition of Knifehead. Now, obviously, when you're comparing the two, Gypsy Danger benefits a little bit by having better articulation, but if you really are liking the designs of kaijus and you want something a little bit smaller, these ones fit the bill really nicely. Now, for its articulation, this is, again, where these figures are going to be a little bit more limited. For Knifehead, for example, you can only really rotate the arm back and forth. You can't seem to rotate the legs much at all. There seems to be just a little bit of a wiggle, but not enough that I can actually move it back and forth. The tail is obviously posed the way it is. There's no movability there, and it doesn't seem to be the case at all where you can rotate the head. By looking at sort of the side, it looked for a second like I'd be able to turn it, but clearly from the top of it, it's just one continued sculpt, so you're not be able to rotate it at all. And then one thing also I was really surprised to see, if I just move his arms up, you can also move these tiny little arms on the inside closer to his body. So I guess that would be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, doesn't seem to be any articulation at all here for the lower half of his body. So really, it chalks up to only being 4 points of articulation for the Kaiju Knifehead. Still a nice little release. I mean, I mentioned this, I think, when we looked at, let's get him to pose a little bit properly here. You kind of have to bring his arms a little bit down because he is very top heavy, very front heavy. When we had a look at, just move over the building here a little bit, when we looked initially at Gypsy Danger, I did say that point, and I'll mention it again here in the review of Knifehead. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I know not everyone's going to like the idea of smaller scale kaijus, smaller scale like mech suits. But if you like the idea of cityscapes, something a couple of viewers had commented and weighed in down below in the original review of Gypsy Danger, they really like the idea of being able to build big cityscapes. And really, ideally, for the price for what these things are selling for, I think most of these online are going for like $15 to $18. Not bad at all. Not only are you getting small-sized monsters, not only are you getting also the mech suits that fight them, but you're getting tiny little buildings that you can destroy and dismantle if you want to. And you also get the benefit of having these tiny little vehicles that can patrol the cityscapes, city scenes, and also battle the monsters and try and protect the city. Well, so much for the military protecting the city. It looks like Knifehead has destroyed one of the skyscrapers nearby. One of the things I like about the skyscraper buildings is the fact that while they have to be in a certain order, so you have to put them in the order that they come in, you can at least rotate the individual pieces. In other words, you don't have to line them up where they always have to be on one side. You can easily rotate those building pieces around, and they stack exactly the same way. They have to be in the right order, but at least you don't have to line up one side where, okay, that little part of the point has to go on the left side of the building. You can easily just rotate them around. Yeah, I also wondered, though, by looking at the Pacific Rim Knifehead and then earlier looked at the Gypsy Danger, I was thinking, I wonder if you could actually take the individual pieces of the building and just make a taller skyscraper. It doesn't work that way. You can change and mix and match the top parts, but you can't just continue to add those buildings. One way they could have also done is just made the exact same shape of the jagged lines, so that you could, in fact, just continue to build a big, giant building, one that reaches the ceiling if you have enough of these Pacific Rim toys. What do you guys think of this line, by the way? Is this something that you guys have been collecting, or do you feel like the Pacific Rim from McFarlane Toys is a total pass? Let me know what you guys think of this line down below in the comments section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the Pacific Rim Kaiju Knifehead that we had the chance to have a look in this review. If you guys certainly did enjoy this video, why not throw it a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to see more Pacific Rim toy reviews, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure as well you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.